Welcome to Bogota, Colombia, a city that represents global change. Welcome to the convening of a movement that has never wavered in its pursuit of social justice, restoring dignity to the global south, and transforming drug policy into one rooted in dignity, health, and rights.
Why did you choose this country?
Well, this was the choice of Naomi Berkshire, and she insisted that it come here. And I think it was a very prescient decision and very insightful because of the Colombian influence on the global system at the moment, getting that resolution passed to have a review of drug policy, with Colombia leading that, with the fact that they've managed to push back against the American sort of investment in destroying the crops. Here, the glyphosate spraying, they've cut back more than 60% of that has been reduced.
The Petro government has created a new drug policy. It focuses more in protecting people, in protecting their lives, than criminalization.
Hace 10 años, 15 años, cuando hablábamos de reducción de daños o entregar una jeringa o analizar una sustancia, nos querían meter a la cárcel. O sea, nos amenazaban con que cometíamos delitos. Y hoy en día la reducción de daños es parte de la política pública en el país. Y está muy normalizado ya la sala de consumo, está muy normalizado los análisis de sustancias, los derechos de las personas. Sí, cuando uno mira en el largo plazo, sí ha habido un cambio y creo que además, pues creo que también hemos ayudado mucho en ese cambio, ¿no?
Right now we are in Cambia. This is the first supervised consumption site, or DCR or OPC in Colombia and South America. It's not just give the needles, it's not just give the naloxone or have a space to use drugs. It's the relationship that we create and the confidence and love and the empathy with the users.
Se hacen unas actividades como el de duchas, el de conseguir ropa, el de poderles brindar el refrigerio, un alimento especial cierto día en la semana.
Mi rol particularmente es hacer todo el proceso de referenciación de los usuarios teniendo en cuenta sus necesidades.
Sí, es muy satisfactorio poder ayudar a las personas, a la comunidad y sobre todo a la comunidad que como a uno lo han señalado por ser consumidor de sustancias psicoactivas.
This is the Corporación Acción Técnica Social House. This is a project that wants to promote bills to the Congress to regulate cocaine and the coca leaf. And this is the room for drug checking service. We use reagents to test substance. And in this part, we use microscope. We check the flower to check the insects, fungus, and other microplastics. This machine to detect the THC and CBD.
As a Latin American, how do you feel about the conference being here in Bogota?
Of course, I'm very glad, Of course, we will use it to illuminate this conference and try to expand the voices for all the rest of the region.
My organization is called Proyecto Soma. We do harm reduction in Peru, and Echele Cabeza gave us all the tools we needed to operate, and it's the same with other people in the region. This is like the center for harm reduction in the region.
How can you describe the harm reduction scene in Peru?
Well, it is quite small, but we have drug checking services, we have orientation services for young people who use drugs, we do some journalism, we do the curation of information.
We're based in the United States, and in the United States, naloxone is too expensive. The problem with expense is that not enough naloxone gets to where it needs to go, into the hands of people who use drugs. So what we do at Remedy Alliance is bulk distribution of naloxone in large quantities. We've distributed more than 5 million doses, mostly to underfunded harm reduction programs.
Let me just start off as an American up here. I always used to apologize for the havoc my country had wreaked with the drug war around the world. Now I must also apologize for the havoc we are and are going to wreak on the world for the next 4 years. My apologies to all of you.
The words to describe what's happening now are it's worse than a crisis. It's a catastrophe for harm reduction funding at this point. In January, when we saw the news about the US dismantling USAID, PEPFAR was the second largest donor for harm reduction, and they were funding things like opioid agonist therapy for about 30,000 people across 9 countries by 2024. But they funded the infrastructure and the clinics and the drop-in centres. With needle and syringe programs in many countries, those have just disappeared, they've closed. But most importantly, I think to emphasise is the peer outreach piece, because if you don't have that piece, you don't really have harm reduction in a functional way.
It's killing people, it's risking people's medication, ARVs, risking them overdosing, and on top of that, it's directly impacting staff who have been doing and trying to do an amazing job. But most importantly, people are sharing needles, not getting their methadone, and feel abandoned. Because these are people I love and they're dying.
The global south countries, they need to start looking inside their countries to start funding services like harm reduction. But the sudden pullout of America, that was something else. Only if they had phased it out in steps, that would have made sense.
We also need to be making noise. The government, you need to rescue, you need to step up. You need to divest and invest in programs that work and evidence-based programs.
So this booth is based on our Divest Invest campaign, calling for governments and donors to move funds from punitive drug policies towards programs that prioritize community health and justice. We know that the amount of funding going towards punitive drug policies vastly exceeds what is going towards harm reduction. We found that it's actually 750 times more, and that's old. That's not even the latest data.
Myself seated here, I've also been incarcerated because of heroin for just my personal consumption.
In Indonesia, since 2008 until 2020, on narcotic case, it tends to increase. It become overcrowding of the prison. I think around 150,000 people now.
En temas de encarcelamiento, también es una región con altísimos índices de encarcelamiento por delitos de droga, con altísimos índices de sobrepoblación penal, donde las condiciones no cumplen con los requisitos mínimos de dignidad para las personas que están privadas de libertad.
We've been collecting case studies to show you people that these approaches that prioritize communities, that prioritize health and justice work. There's examples from, well, of course, Colombia, our host country, but then there's this Housing First initiative from Chile. There's a restorative justice program from Costa Rica.
I can tell you about Uruguay, for example, where they had real kind of overcapacity in the prisons and they were arresting people for use of cannabis on a regular basis. And in 2012, I think, they were the first country in the world to legalize the commercialization of marijuana. This meant that they weren't spending money on arresting people, and so they then put money into a harm reduction approach, which, has yielded great results in the country.
La coca, la hoja de coca, está reconocida como un patrimonio cultural de los pueblos indígenas en Colombia. La ley del 86 buscaba proteger y que cultivaran para su consumo, y hoy en día ha ganado un espacio y el gobierno nacional busca que haya unos usos legales de la hoja de coca.
We are here at HRI with this exhibition on the impacts of the prohibition of the coca and cocaine production chain on the Amazon basin, like illegal logging, illegal mining, deforestation, land grabbing, creating a series of governance problems and threats to the territories of traditional communities, metropolitan regions, all over Colombia, Bolivia, Brazil, Peru, as cocaine moves to national and international markets. So we need to break this cycle of corruption if we really want to promote climate adaptation. Initially, we need to legalize the plant, so the coca leaf should be free.
How would you regulate cocaine? In a nutshell.
Well, look, we need licensed pharmacy models. We need to look at a whole range of regulatory models around cocaine. But it's good to have the conversation, to have the producers, the users, suppliers. It's the critical question now is, look, what can we learn from the cannabis market for the stimulants market? It's exciting that regulation is finally on the table here at HRI.
The amount of intergenerational trauma that has been created in a country such as Colombia, in which more than the war on drugs, the armed conflict has basically washed as and clean as and our territories, that is something that has to be considered in the discussion. Any single solution for advancing in harm reduction, in legalization, in regulation, in anything, has to consider first and foremost ways of current reparation, reconciliation, coping, repair of social fabric based on the excessive and just absurd amount of trauma that communities have in Colombia.
We live in a world where there is less respect for multilateralism and many governments are opting out from international organizations. What do you think about this process?
The decision of states maybe of stepping out from multilateralism doesn't mean that the rights are not recognized. Even though states are still bound to the human rights treaties, they are still obligated to comply with them.
What is it that we should do differently than before? Do you have any recommendations to activists?
We never succeed, really, unless we can win the political center. That's pivotal. That means we need to use the right language that speaks to the political center. One of the great lessons and successes in European harm reduction and drug policy beginning in the 1990s and the 2000s was that the police bought into the harm reduction approach. They bought into, changing policing policies. They bought into prescribing heroin or safe injection sites. They bought into those things.
We are losing the ground under our heads. We are losing the successes and gains of all career. And that's very hard, and we are losing people. We already see that the people will die from it. And that's very hard. That's why actually here we are to support each other.
I love community care. I love how we've come together to really support each other and be there for each other. And how what the United States is doing right now is forging that for us. And so, continue collective care.
What I can say is that we survive, we are alive, we are still fighting, and I think that we can do it together.